Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 12th of July. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. Remember, you can always get your latest forecast at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. Look for the TV button link at the bottom of the page. Click that and you'll have access to all of the maps we've made during the day and that you'll find here on the show. And of course, you can find the current information anytime by heading to the website, looking through that map. Just click it and you'll get your latest forecast information, and also find links to the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, the National Tsunami Warning Center, as well as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, and so many other sources of information around our nation. If you can't find what you're looking for anytime, please let me know. I'm happy to serve you any way I possibly can. david.snider@noaa.gov is how you find me. Your hazardous weather situation is not a whole lot of a change there for the central or western parts of the interior, or certainly along the Alcan border. These are red flag warnings. The good news is smoke advisories have been lifted for many locations, but the red flag warnings do continue, and that is mainly due to lightning activity in otherwise very high or extreme fire danger areas there. So red flag warnings are posted for most of the central, the eastern, and parts of the Koyukuk and lower Yukon valleys there through tonight and into tomorrow. We do not have red flag warnings at this point for southern sections of Alaska, including the Copper River Valley, south central or southwestern Alaska, or southeast for that matter. As we look at fire danger updated this afternoon, you can see the extreme fire danger that stretches all the way down the middle and the upper Yukon Valley. We have high fire danger to the Copper River Valley, and also at least high fire danger, if not extreme, in some spots there across the Kenai Peninsula and into the sections of Anchorage and the southern Susitna Valley. Out across southwest, also see some pockets of very high to extreme fire danger there, all the way out toward the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, and across northwestern Alaska, again with periods of cooler and wetter air, but still not a major flushing of the very dry conditions that we've been seeing for weeks on end just yet. As we look at the satellite picture this afternoon, you'll notice a broad area of cloud cover across southeast. It does look like trends are kind of resetting to what we would consider a little more typical for summertime this time of the year. Out to the west, several waves of low pressure there and unsettled weather across the central and the eastern chain. You'll notice a wave of low pressure here across Shemya out toward Adak, and several other circulations are closer to shore. And also a boundary sweeping southward where high pressure is set in a little bit more of a stable layer of air across the Bering Strait and across the Kotzebue Sound region and the Gulf of Anadyr. As you look up north around the Yukon Valley and northward, we can see periods of cloud cover there all the way up to the Arctic Village region. High pressure is sitting up across the Arctic Ocean that's pushing in that northerly flow. And with that, we can get a little bit of a cooler flow working its way in. That boundary has been working its way southward, in fact, at the lower levels, and you can see that cloud cover is a little more extensive across the middle Tanana Valley. Some of that surely is smoke, and that has not mixed out entirely, but it does look like out across the west, some of that seems to be improving, so we can hope that in time you'll see a little bit more of that transitional to improvement across the interior and certainly in south central. And right now, at least for south central and southwest, that is part of our forecast going forward. As you look at the visible satellite picture, again across the interior and south central, you will notice some breaks in the clouds, and each little bit of that, of course, still allows that ample amount of summer sunshine to reach the ground and bubble up any shower and thunderstorm clouds into something a little more vigorous at times across the interior. That's where we're more likely to see that. It might get a little bit more around the surrounding high country of south central, but we're not expecting to see anything terribly potent at this point. High pressure across Prince William Sound, 1,017 millibars there. Low pressure across the western Brooks Range, holding at 1,004 millibars. And we have seen a few areas of shower and thunderstorm activity points there around the Middle Tanana Valley and points northward out across the southern parts of the Alaska Peninsula, 1,008 millibars there. Pockets of rain and a little bit of drizzle for the Alaska Peninsula and areas of fog. Low pressure sitting out across the western chain at 999 millibars. And we've got a little bit of warmer air working northward into the Chukchi coast. Low pressure sitting south of southeast, and as we could see on satellite, the clouds are being broken up across the Gulf. 1,017 millibars there, the high pressure pushing down on that, stabilizing the air a little bit and punching some holes through the clouds this afternoon. As we get into tonight, once again, we're going to focus on those smokestacks with the wavy lines, indicating a chance for at least some smoke to cover up closer to the ground, and that's really going to be a little more extensive around parts of the interior. But we should see some diminishing areas of smoke around south and west and south central. I think we're already noticing that today around the Anchorage area and hopefully where you are on the Kenai Peninsula. Low pressure across the western chain will hover there with the trough moving slowly north and east across the central and western chain. High pressure sitting across the Gulf at 1,016 millibars will keep ample cloud cover sitting over southeast. Nothing terribly extensive as far as precipitation goes, but passing showers will likely be part of your day. And your night for that matter. Out across the Seward Peninsula, spotty showers there, and areas of fog are a little bit more likely across the north coast as we're seeing a little bit more open water and certainly some cooler air coming in from the north with high pressure sitting out over the Arctic Ocean. A few showers, even a thunderstorm possible across the Brooks Range. Some of that might sneak a little bit further northward, but it really looks like the bulk of that is going to be south of the Brooks Range to the Alaska Range and into southwest tomorrow. However, we should see that gradually reducing in coverage area across southwest and south central as we get into the weekend for Saturday and Sunday, that is. And showers across southeast should be expected. High pressure will kind of carve a niche out of a little bit of a drier air and more stable air across the interior and forcing any moisture that's coming in off the Gulf to run over Kodiak first and Bristol Bay and then on up into the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. Pockets of rain and drizzle expected there with some regions of fog, and that should be the trend as well out across the Aleutians. With low pressure sitting just west of St. Lawrence Island and over the Gulf of Vanadier, we would expect to see a little bit more of a stable atmosphere here. Clouds, fog, and probably not a lot of wind right across the Bering Strait communities and into the Chukchi coast. As we look out into your Sunday, watch for periods of showers there and even a few thunderstorms across the Brooks Range. The western coast looking at an opportunity for some smoke to kind of hover around in the region, but a lot of that again should be trending toward more improvement than what we've seen in recent days for the west and southwest, and that includes south central as well. Showers will continue across the central and southern parts of southeast. We expect high pressure to nudge a little bit further eastward there at 1,019 millibars. And low pressure will be very close to St. Paul and St. George at 1,003 millibars. That broad southeasterly flow still sweeping across Kodiak. Don't want to leave you out there, but we do expect to see some light rainfall and maybe some showers across south central as we go into the weekend. A broad area of low pressure in the upper atmosphere will keep this kind of unsettled. Behind that is a ridge of high pressure, which could mean another warmer spell, but it's going to take some time to move this through, probably through the end of July as it looks right now. High pressure setting up across the northern Bering at 1,010 millibars keeps things pretty locked in around the Chukchi coast and across the central and eastern Beaufort. Low pressure way out to the west is slowly driving in a westerly flow across the central and western chain. That means showers there and areas of fog, of course, still lingering out across the open waters there and at times across the northern Arctic coast. Let's take a look at temperatures as we get into tomorrow morning early. We're talking about most areas not really cooling off into the below the mid-50s there for Fort Yukon, for Fairbanks, for Galena, all the way up toward Ambler, about low 60s there. 51 around Point Hope, Point Lay, mid to upper 40s for most of the Arctic coast. 41 though a little bit cooler around Kaktovik. Southwest, you're looking at temps in the lower to mid-50s. Bristol Bay, Lake Iliamna, Kodiak, lower 50s for you. Southeast, we expect to see overnight minimums back in the mid to upper 50s, maybe the upper 50s around Hyder. As we get into the afternoon tomorrow, expect daytime highs in the mid to upper 50s for many in the Inside Passage, and for some cases like Gustavus and Juneau, probably Sitka, it might be even warmer, mid-60s for you. For Southwest, mid to upper 60s across parts of the lower and middle Yukon, mid-70s out across the Tanana Valley toward the Koyukuk Valley and Galena, and 60s for the Beaufort Seacoast. Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, Utqiagvik, you're looking at lower to mid-60s. Should be a beautiful day. Low to mid-60s for the Chukchi Coast, 58 for Nome, 75 in Fairbanks, and lower 60s for the Cook Inlet region, including Anchorage, 59 in Kodiak, and about 56 in Sandpoint, 58 in Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. Sunday morning, look for temperatures back in the lower to mid-50s for south central and southeast. Same goes for southeast temperatures in the Inside Passage. You're probably talking about readings back in the mid to upper 50s, 55 in Skagway, 42 in Utqiagvik, 45 in Kaktovik, and it looks like Kotzebue should come in in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees there. 53 in Nome, Gamble, Sevilla, 48. Cold Bay, Falls Pass, King Cove, you're all looking at overnight lows closer to 50 degrees. St. Paul, about 49. Nunivak Island, Macquarie, about 51. As we get into your afternoon on Sunday, look for temps in the mid to upper 70s for Yukon. Going to be one of the warmer spots as always. Eagle and Northway not too far behind. Glen Allen, 74. Talkeetna, about 70 degrees. 60 in Kodiak, 62 in Cordova. A little milder there in Valdez. At around Amonix, 66. And Unalakleet, about 66 degrees on your Sunday afternoon. You can always check these temperatures out online, weather.gov/Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on aviation weather now, we expect to see widespread areas of smoke across the central and eastern interior. For south central and southwest, conditions may be easing somewhat as far as visibility concerns go. Smoke will still be present. Marginal weather is expected across southeast. Look for IFR concerns across the west and across the chain and across the Beaufort Seacoast, with hit and miss marginal conditions across the west, southwest, and into the southern third of Alaska, especially southeast. No big change there for Saturday afternoon. We expect to see IFR across the Kenai Fjords region into Kodiak Island, western parts of the Bering and the chain, watching for IFR conditions to sweep down through the upper Koyukuk and into the middle Yukon Valley, and as well as the eastern parts of the interior. The shower and thunderstorm activity may be a little more widely scattered than it has been in recent days, but we do expect it to be focused on some of the northern communities in the interior, maybe just over the Brooks Range and into the Alaska Range. Any storms we see should be fairly slow moving thanks to very slow steering currents in the upper atmosphere. As we get into Sunday morning, marginal weather across southeast, south central, most of the Copper River Valley into southwest. Watching for IFR conditions across most of the Beaufort Seacoast into the Chukchi, as well as the Bering Sea and parts of southwest there. We will see smoke once again, really focused on the interior, it looks like, and across the Alcan border. For parts of southwest, parts of south central. Again, conditions seem to be improving at this point, so that's something to be hopeful for. Marginal weather will continue across southeast, and again, no big change there for your Sunday afternoon. Widely scattered shower and storm activity, mainly concentrated across the central and northern parts of the interior for your Sunday afternoon. South central, southwest, it does not look like we'll have as great of a thunderstorm risk there as we go through the rest of the weekend. Smoke concerns will still be present, but eased across southwest and south central, but continuing across the central and eastern interior. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal starts there, heading over toward IFR as the day goes on. As we get into Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, watching for shower and storm activity later in the day. Marginal weather there, IFR conditions through the afternoon as conditions set in. Looking for IFR in the afternoon for Rainy Pass and for Windy Pass. Isabel Pass, no big change there from yesterday. Marginal conditions to start. And Mentasta Pass, we do expect to see some improvement as the day goes on. Looking for VFR at the end of the day. Tanita Pass, IFR conditions to marginal weather as the day goes on. Portage Pass looking for an IFR start and some improvement as your afternoon sets in. Chilkoot and White Pass, as we've seen, pretty much looks like marginal conditions through the weekend. Your freezing levels have levels as cool as 8,000 feet around St. Paul, St. George, into parts of Bristol Bay. North and south of that, we expect to see levels there 10 to 12,000 feet. And also looking at levels above 10,000 feet for northern parts of southeast and the Brooks Range there. So conditions are still fairly warm. Icing potential is really high up there, above 10,000 feet. We do see some areas that could reach isolated moderate if you're flying high, but really the greatest risk, I think, will be convective areas that could feature, of course, isolated but severe areas of icing if you're in the vicinity of any of those shower or storm clouds there. As we look at the jet stream, you can see a powerful Pacific jet moving across the North Pacific anywhere from 90 to 125 knots, a trough of low pressure across the Pacific Northwest, 65 to 90 knots with high pressure sitting across the western parts of Canada, the Yukon and British Columbia, steering in this next round of low pressure here, gradually taking shape as that high pressure ridge backs out of here. That's what's brought us all the intense heat that seems to be backing out, but you can still see it as control of southeast and the central and eastern interior with southerly winds moving across the Gulf. Low pressure across the southern Bering Sea. Wind speeds there across the northern Bering coming in around 10 to 20 knots from the east. On the south side, much stronger. Westerlies 30 to 50 knots. At 3,000 feet, a similar pattern here. Now, our ridge is still intact, but for western Alaska, we're in much more of a dominant south and southeasterly flow. Meanwhile, southeast is still under light northerly flow coming off that ridge across the eastern Gulf. Westerlies continue across the northern Arctic coast, anywhere from 15 to 20 knots. Let's take a look at turbulence then. Generally speaking, below 4,000 feet is where we'll find very isolated areas of chop across the Beaufort Seacoast, generally from Point Barrow and Utqiagvik all the way east toward demarcation point, and Kaktovik. For southern areas around Kodiak Island, probably around the Barrens and into Shelikof Strait, we do expect to see considerable moderate to be a little more widespread there, and that goes all the way down toward Port Lions and Kodiak itself, generally below 5,000 feet, a broader area that stretches out over Lake Iliamna and toward the Kobuk Mountains for isolated moderate, it looks like. Now for areas out across the central and even eastern Aleutian chain, we expect to see some isolated moderate there, generally below 5,000 feet. And of course, we're still watching for convective areas to develop in the afternoon, which always implies isolated severe turbulence there. As we go forward through the weekend, don't expect a whole lot of change here, but it's always worth noting and checking anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/TV.
It's a complicated project, but a simple life. You can study whales all over the world, you can study harbor seals all over the world, but you cannot study them in silence all over the world. So we really need this sort of piece of wilderness, this untrammeled wilderness, as they say, in order to answer some of these questions.
So we've been monitoring underwater sound here in Glacier Bay since May of 2000. And the reason why we're doing that is to understand what the park is like from the perspective of a marine mammal, because marine mammals are very dependent on the natural sound environment.
If you sort of bring it back to humans, humans respond to noise in very stereotypical ways, and other mammals do the same thing. So, if you go to a concert with your buddy and the music's really loud, you're going to talk at a higher pitch. You're going to talk louder, and you might have to repeat yourself. And marine mammals do the same thing if it gets noisy. So we're seeing, just which of those three that they actually do. We're here on Strawberry Island for the entire summer.
We sample 8 to 12 hours a day. There'll be 2 people who are on our beach station doing scans, marking each whale in the area, 2 people who are doing focal follows from our tower, which is a temporary tower that we have set up here on Strawberry Island. And then we have 2 people who are in the kayak who are doing fine scale acoustic sampling for harbor seals. Got a harbor seal at 23 meters.
Got it? What's her bearing?
Bearing is 5822121.
Being able to pair what an animal is saying with where the animal is saying it is an amazing data set. It's a hard data set to get. It takes a lot of work, but it can answer so many questions.
So our cruise ship right here in the background is right on time today. We have a blissful hour and a half before the cruise ship gets here where we can watch our whales in silence. And then our ship comes in, bringing with it the noise that it brings, and we watch our whales while the ship's here to see whether or not their behavior is changing. And then it's going to go up bay and bring passengers to go see the glaciers, and we are going to get that blissful quiet again to see whether or not our whales are going back to that natural behavior.
This is the computer that runs our underwater acoustic monitoring. And there's a 5-mile cable from my office that leads out to a hydrophone that's out recording live sounds in Glacier Bay. And if I turn this up a little bit louder for the moment, that's the sound of a male harbor seal roaring because it's the mating season.
Bartlett Cove, Strawberry Island. Building a good field team and building some good camaraderie is really important. We have sort of these daily routines of things that we do together. So there's a schedule that we check every morning, who's gonna cook lunch that day, who's gonna cook dinner. And then every day we take a group photo. And then every day we do a daily check-in. We talk about what worked that day, what didn't work that day, and what we learned either from the island or from each other over the course of the day. Surface 900600.
Last night, there were anywhere from 8 to 10 individuals right along the kelp bed off the point. And we were trying to figure out exactly what they were doing. So as acousticians, Michelle and I got a hydrophone.
That seemed like the right thing to do.
Put the hydrophone in the water to see what was going on. Well, we dropped the hydrophone and it was so quiet. There was not a single roar.
Nothing. We heard
It was
nothing.
just so unusual.
One of the things we did observe yesterday was 2 large bull killer whales who had come into the area that we learned today were transient killer whales. They do come into this area to hunt harbor seals. This is a pupping ground. That's what they come in for.
Yep.
We cannot in any way, shape, or form definitively link the presence of mammal-eating killer whales with the silence of harbor seals.
No, but it is quite interesting that they happened at the exact same time. It's always an adventure on Strawberry Island. You never know what the day's gonna bring.
This morning at 5:15 in the morning, the area was just boiling with whales. I had one 15-minute scan this morning where I was literally hopping back and forth on either side of the theodolite, calling out numbers to try and get all the whales as quickly as possible. And then 15 minutes later, we couldn't find them. Aside from getting to be outside all the time, my favorite part of doing my PhD is getting to work with Leanna.
It goes both ways.
It helps when you put 2 minds that think differently onto the same problem.
Global ocean noise is a real problem, and there are areas of the ocean that have underwater sound from vessels so often that you could almost consider it an urban environment. Glacier Bay is a very remote area, and it was set aside as a national park in part to do scientific research. And we're privileged to be able to use it as a natural laboratory where we can better understand the impacts of underwater noise.
There are some places that act like characters in your life, and I think that a lot of Alaskans can resonate with the fact that living here is like having another family member. It's like having somebody really, really important who's sort of nudging you to be a little uncomfortable all the time and to stretch yourself all the time because it's worth it. I've lived here for almost 10 years. I've made Alaska my home, and so I'm an Alaskan by choice.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
On to your marine weather now. Sea ice will continue to be fairly spotty generally right along the coast. One exception would be there for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, where higher concentration ice still exists. Most areas, though, have seen substantial opening of the water. Still some low-end marginal ice in that entire blue shaded area west to Utqiagvik and beyond, but most areas in the Chukchi now are generally open. This is the latest map as of the 12th of July. As always, you can get the very latest information from the Alaska Sea Ice Program, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. As you look at southeast, southerly winds blowing on the inside, 15 knots, 10 to 15 knot winds there coming up, 2 to 3 foot seas, west and northwesterly wind coming down the outer coast. You're looking at about 10 knot winds with 4 to 5 foot seas across the outside. As you get into Sunday, southerlies coming up the inside there, about 10 to 20 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. Westerlies coming in across the outer coast, anywhere from 5 to 10 knots and 4 to 5 foot seas in most areas there on Sunday afternoon. For Saturday on the inside of Cook Inlet, easterly flow working its way across the Barren Islands, 25 knots and 7 foot seas. Southerly winds coming up Cook Inlet, 10 to 15 knots expected there. A southeasterly flow, 10 knots and 2 foot seas. West and southwesterlies across the north and western Gulf. Southeasterly winds a little bit further down from Kenai Fjords into the Barrens at 20 knots with a 4 foot sea on Saturday. For your Sunday, light winds across Cook Inlet there for everyone involved. Heading out for fish, looking for 1 to 2 foot seas there. Stronger winds across the Barrens, 20 knots and 5 to 6 foot seas. 10 knots inside of Prince William Sound and a easterly flow working its way across the Gulf there. 10 knots and 15 foot seas, or 15 knot winds from the east, I should say, and 4 foot seas across the western Gulf. Thankfully, it's going to be that nice out there across your Sunday. Here's a look at the Alaska Peninsula. And you'll notice easterly flow working through Bristol Bay all the way down toward Cold Bay with 3 foot seas there. A south and easterly flow coming up from Akiak to Chignik, a 7 foot sea on a 20 knot wind. Northwesterlies coming out of Sand Point and Cold Bay, 20 knots and 7 foot seas there for Kodiak Island. 7 to 8 foot seas on either side with a east and southeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots over the island. You'll see that stick around for most of your Sunday. Not a big change there. Seas in Shelikof come down just a bit. Southwesterlies coming up the Alaska Peninsula, 7 to 8 foot seas there and 3 to 4 foot seas for the Alaska Peninsula. A broad easterly flow across Bristol Bay at 20 knots should be expected through the weekend. For the central and eastern chain, south and westerly winds 15 to 20 knots. You're looking at 7 to 8 foot seas, 6 to 7 foot seas in the west, a little bit more of an east and southeasterly flow on Saturday. That becomes broad and westerly all across the chain as we get into Sunday, a little bit more of a southwesterly shift. South of Nikolsky to Unalaska, 20 knots and 7 foot seas there for your Sunday. For the west coast, southerly winds going into St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound 10 to 15, light winds across most of the eastern Bering Sea, 10 to 15 knots around St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George, all looking at 10 knots and 2 foot seas for your Saturday. And very little change in any area there in the west coast on Sunday. Very light and somewhat variable winds for Norton Sound, 1 foot seas there, and very warm sea surface temperatures. As we look at the Beaufort Sea coast, east and southeasterly winds running around 15 knots and 2 to 3 foot seas. Light southerlies coming up the Chukchi, 10 to 15 knots there, 2 foot seas around the Bering Strait. And as we get into Sunday, the winds are generally light and somewhat variable. At best, 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas for you. A west and northwesterly shift happening around the central and western Beaufort Sea coast. That onshore flow will likely bring in some lower clouds at times, areas of fog, of course, and maybe some stratus closer to the coast. Do expect that to continue as we go through the rest of your early parts of the week. Here's a look at the surface charts one more time for tonight. Areas of showers and maybe some light rain and drizzle out across the Bristol Bay communities with a south and easterly flow coming up over Kodiak Island. The smokestack sign there does certainly mean there will be more wildfire smoke in the area around the central and eastern interior especially. We do have some expectation that it is going to continue to improve around southwest and south central, and certainly in southeast. We have showers noted for you over the weekend. As we get into your Saturday, a widely scattered area of thunderstorm activity may be possible again, especially around higher terrain in the afternoon and the evening hours. And as always we've seen this week, very slow-moving steering currents in the middle and upper parts of the atmosphere will not allow those showers and thunderstorms to move off very quickly at all. So if you have one, you might have it for a little while until it rains itself out. Remember, at the first sign of thunder and lightning, it's always a good idea to go inside, seek shelter immediately, and wait about 30 minutes or so for that thunderstorm to move along on its merry way or simply fall apart, as it were in this case. Trough of low pressure sits across the Brooks Range. With that, we have areas of fog across the Beaufort Sea coast as we go into Saturday, and once again on Sunday, high pressure sitting across the northern Bering at 1,010 millibars. We'll keep light winds moving through there as we saw in the marine forecast there. Things should be generally quiet, and low pressure sits across the Bristol Bay region with light rainfall into the weekend. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.